Mad Munchkin Reaction Theatre Dungeons and Dragons. Hey, wanna know what the most annoying noise in the world is? Yeah, the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon is a thing. And I'm probably going to make lots of enemies here. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. I have some basic knowledge of the game due to most of my friends playing it and other games like it, but I pretty much watched this with next to no knowledge of the game or how accurate it was to the source material. Dungeons and Dragons is an atypical fantasy cartoon from the 80s. It may not be as iconic or as memorable as He-Man or Thundercats or She-Ra, at least not to me, but it is still a magical ride. Literally, since the opening of each episode starts with the main characters boarding a roller coaster ride called Dungeons and Dragons, which transports them into the magical world. The game itself was only 9 years old when the cartoon aired, and like the game, it gained a cult following. Strange that they weren't, doing something related to Dungeons and Dragons that made them end up in the world, like reading a D&D book or, playing the actual game! The show focused on a group of 6 friends who are transported into the magical world that is loosely based on the realm of Dungeons and Dragons. The show followed their adventures as they tried to find a way home with the help of their guide, Dungeon Master. Yes, that's his actual name. His mother must have hated him. The children's main goal is to find a way back to the real world, taking detours to help others in the world and fight monsters and dragons and face their own inner demons. Believe it or not, this show was pretty controversial at the time of its original air date. Many religious activist groups at the time calling it too violent and labelling the demonic themes as inappropriate for children. Though clearly nowadays it would be considered corny, fluffy and rushed, it's actually nowhere near as violent as the original game can be. In fact, there's very little in the show that ties it to the game at all. It is in a way its own unique separate thing. The strangest thing about the show is that there's no real origin episode. Instead, the starter sequence serves as a recap, showing how the kids ended up in the world and that the show was mainly about them getting home. Odd, most people would jump at the chance to be in a magical world and be the characters they play in a role-playing game. Isn't that the whole point of a role-playing game? Or am I missing something? The main villain of the show is Venger, a powerful magical demon who wishes to rule the realm and believes the power from the children's weapons would help him to do so. Venger is also voiced by Optimus Prime, which I think is hilarious. The animation is pretty typical of the time and actually has very little violence in it at all. The biggest strength of this cartoon is the story, the writing, and of course the 6 kids themselves. Though they each are stereotypical child characters, they each had relatable quirks and fears, making us care whether they did get home or not. There's a lot of comedy, drama, and conflict between the 6 characters, and in a show that was fairly predictable regardless of it being set in a fantasy world, the kids are what make the show worth watching. While quite a few episodes of the first season were hit or miss for me, the show really got into gear in the 2nd and 3rd seasons. The characters interact well off each other, and all of them get moments to shine and develop. While there were limits to what 80s cartoons could depict, the series rarely made light of the dangers the kids were in. It was always implied, if not demonstrated, that the kids could wind up killed or enslaved if they failed in their adventure of the week. One episode demonstrates all of the fears of the children in vivid, even graphic detail, such as Sheila's fear of being alone or Diana's fear of growing old and feeble. For a show religious groups often lambasted for supernatural themes, its morals are actually about encouraging unity, courage, honour and selflessness. Many times the kids could have had a free ride home, but their desire to not allow someone in the realm to suffer if they left prevented it. But yeah, as iconic as this show is to fans of the game as well as those who aren't fans of the game, it's still pretty subpar to what it could have been. It's still worth a watch though. Check it out guys if you haven't already. I'm Mad Munchkin, stay creative.